Welcome to Empires of Innovation. We're diving into the worlds of technology, education, impact, and more with the dynamic Ozan Sonmez. Ozan has an impressive background ranging from finance to environmental studies, but is most well known in the startup world as a mentor, accelerator builder, corporate innovator, and entrepreneurial educator. Throughout this podcast, Ozan will be pulling on his decades of experience living and working as an angel investor, program director, and more throughout the Middle East, United States, and his home country of Turkey. For this series, we're bringing it all together to talk about tech for a better tomorrow, where we question the impact that technology is making today, how to fund and grow more of this impact in the future, and how founders in this field of technology can make it all happen. So, let's jump into this episode. Welcome back.
Hey.
Empires of Innovation. I'm Claire Messina. Your Ozan Sonmez, our very experienced guest for this podcast. So super excited to keep the conversation going. You are our resident expert on, technology, startups, education, entrepreneurship, innovation, everything. And we're going to really tap into that, especially for this series, which is Tech for Good.
Yeah.
In the first episode, it was kind of a general introduction to Tech for Good, how people can get started, also talking about generally social impact, education for youth, the next generation, and really just making sure that it's accessible to them to get involved with this sort of stuff. Today, I want to really dive deeper into the startups and founders aspect of it. And really talk about raising capital for Tech for Good, because I think that's a big question for a lot of people out there, especially those who maybe are considering starting a startup or have already done it and don't know where to go. And I think, you have a very diverse background. We didn't talk about it too much, but you're also an angel investor yourself. So you have a lot of great expertise that we can tap into for this conversation. So
wonderful.
Welcome.
Thank you. Let's go.
I think, let's go. I think I really want to talk about how a founder or a startup team can strike a balance between, meeting the expectations of investors, but also staying true to their mission. Like, especially if they're like a tech or solution focused startup that has to keep that mission alive, that impact mission alive. And also whoever might be buying into it has to kind of buy into that mission as well. So how can you strike that balance?
It's always a challenge for any founder to raise money. It's not a walk in the park. And maybe taking a step back in the fundraising journey, I usually start with a few questions to founders who come to me for fundraising advice, even to pitch me for my money. I ask them, especially for tech founders, it's easy. If you're building a technology, a product that you want angel investing in or venture capital investing in, unless you're living in a very established economy like the US and maybe UK, your first point to understand is you want to sell your company. And people get confused a little bit about that. So why am I selling my company? I'm just raising funds. I'm just going to get money and use the money to do something else. But angels are, maybe sometimes there's an exception for angels, but venture capital is required to return the money that they got from limited partners, whether they're endowment funds, whether they're corporates, whether they're governments, whether they're investment funds of funds. That doesn't matter. They are promising institutions that have more resources, that are using venture capital as an alternative asset tool, they need the money back. And usually within the 10-year period, it's called sunsetting. So they go and they get the money, they need to give it back in 10 years. They need to close their company, their fund, which is a company, and give the money back. So with for-profit startups, that means if you're raising capital in the second year of your founding, and if the fund is investing in the second year of its funding, in 8 years, you are declaring your intention to sell your company. Because if you don't, the investors don't get their money back. That's why they're not going to invest in you. With initial public offerings, IPOs, you don't need to sell your full company. You might actually have public offering that will buy most of the investor shares, so you could still be in your company. And one famous example, like the one that's mostly used in the last 10 years, is Airbnb. They've successfully IPO'd, and now the founders are still in the company. They're making decisions that matter for the company. But that's a very, very, very small percentage of startups that are being built. A startup is built to grow fast, and a startup is built to exceed the law of gravity, the takeoff, will grow beyond everybody's expectation, and will return equally unequal returns. So that's the technology side. It's easy. It's a little bit straightforward. With impact, that's where it gets tricky, because the impact founder has to maximize two things. One, maximize the impact they want to do in the world, and two, maximize the wealth, the profit they get out of what they're doing, especially when they need external capital. There are some impact investors who would like to help see both grow, not prioritize one or the other, but have both of them go hand in hand, because the more revenue you have in your product and service as a social entrepreneur, if it's designed well, the more impact you have. So money is a means to create impact. But most of the time you see technology founders or impact founders that would like to present themselves as technology founders downplay the impact side, because there are not so many impact investors, but there are a lot of technology investors. So they cannot get money from impact investors, and they want to kind of put a clock of wealth and profit and creation and then go to normal technology investors, which doesn't usually work, because then they go like, okay, then you need to be doing this and this and this instead of prioritizing impact. And that's where the disconnect happens. So for technology founders, it's easier to align incentives. For impact founders, it's a little bit more tricky.
Yeah. I mean, it's also kind of begs the question, at what point does an impact founder have to really, give up on that impact vision in order to, make an investor happy and really, make the returns that they need on that investment? Do you have any advice for a founder who might be in that sort of position?
We have seen over the last 10 years since I moved away, we worked with a lot of impact programs. We did Innovate for Refugees with MITF. MIT Enterprise Forum had a certain batch of impact founders, social entrepreneurship founders. We did the work with SDGs, that as an impact accelerator program that focuses on maximizing both. So I've been involved in a lot of programs. In those programs, the mindset has, for some founders, has become, okay, I couldn't do it. I can't raise money. I'm going to give up. I can't do this anymore. I have to find a real job, or I have to find a real investor. So those people are in despair, and that hurts. But what I've seen more is founders not understanding they need resources to grow their company. Most of the time, I had challenges with founders who were looking into funding, who were looking into resource allocation, who were looking into angel investing as something that is not given to them, although they have a great impact. So they were most of them were sometimes even furious. Oh, I'm doing this great thing and nobody's investing in me. And it's like, why would anybody invest in you? Like, you don't understand the concept of investing. If you want grants, go get grants. But if you want charity, go get charity money. But if you want investors, you need to understand the investors, because you're asking money from them. That was one case where it took some time to convince them to think properly. The second case was, oh, I will never get investments. I was like, okay, why not? Because I want to be true to my mission. Okay, with investments, you could increase your impact 10 times faster to 10 times more people. Where is the mission? Like, you mean you want to remain very, very small and not create no, but I don't want to have money involved. Like, money is a tool. Money doesn't corrupt by itself. It's just a piece of paper, now it's in a plastic card. Money doesn't have any power to do anything. Unless you're corrupt, money cannot corrupt you. It's very difficult. Like, ego is, of course, important. Greed is, of course, like everybody has some part of it. But if you are an impact founder, staying away from money, assuming, oh, if you have more money, we will mean we are not an impact company anymore. No, it's on the contrary. If you have more resources, if you frame money as a resource, if you have more resources, you will have more people to work on your product, which will lead to more people enjoying your product, which is by definition going to help you do more impact in life. One big example I recently had was in Tunis. There was this amazingly passionate founder doing something for the visually impaired. And she couldn't get out of her mind that money will help her. And I keep saying, like, what are you looking for? I need money. I was like, okay, what do you need the money for? Oh, nobody's going to give me, so I give up asking for money. Like, come on, let's be real. Like, what do you need the money for? What will you do? What is the story? Oh, I don't want to do anything else, but I want to train the visually impaired. So, okay, so you need money. No, I don't want. So it was just crazy to talk to that lady. But after that, she understood money is a resource, so she can get more people, she can expand faster, she can reach more people with visual impairment, and then she understood. Okay, now I think I can get some money. Okay, good job, well done, Annie. It takes so much time because it comes with the heart, usually from people that has very little financial experience, financial literacy, or very little startup experience. They just want to do the impact, but they have to understand they can move these two things in parallel if they have the right mindset. Yeah, it was a too long of an answer for a short question, but I think it makes sense.
No, I think that's perfect. I think it also, makes me question how can a founder really like craft a compelling narrative as well,
Sure.
one that they understand. So first, I guess the founder has to understand that
All right.
themselves and know what they need to do and want to do. But how can they communicate that to other people, either who's investing, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, or also who needs to like buy into the mission and
Mm-hmm.
then buy the product or buy the service, whatever it is. How can they really get there?
So, one major tool that I try to teach social entrepreneurs is to build the correlation between input, output, and impact. Most entrepreneurs don't, social entrepreneurs don't understand this correlation. So when you ask them, what is your mission? What's your impact? They say, oh, we trained, let's take the visually impaired example, or let's take another example for environment. So we cleaned this much. We made sure, I invested in a company that's doing upcycling and waste avoidance, not just upcycling, but they're trying to avoid the waste before it begins. I think that's an interesting way to look at things. But they said, okay, we have eliminated X tons of waste. Okay, so that's what you did. That's the output of what you have done. That's the outcome of what you have done. But what's the impact? It's not the kilos of waste that you have been able to eliminate. It is the bad impact that would have happened if those waste was in the nature is the impact. One good example is always this energy related issues. If you bring energy to a remote village, you can look into multiple ways. So one of the ways is like, oh, we enabled a technology that now the villagers have more energy. Okay, so that's the output. So there's something happened. But what's the impact? Oh, because we gave them technology that they have more energy, now they don't need their children to go out and collect wood or other pieces. Okay, so that's the impact the children will have, but doing what? Oh, because they're not able to go, they don't need to go out and collect wood, they can go to school. Oh, okay, that's good. So that's the impact. But it's not actually yet the impact, because what is the impact of the children going to school? Oh, when children go to school, their literacy increases. Okay, that's still the output or the outcome of the whole thing. What happens when their literacy levels? Oh, they can be employable. They get more resources, so they have better living conditions. Okay, so that's the kind of impact. In other words, like we take out old technologies that used to burn wood, and there is smoke in the house or smoke in a neighborhood. Okay, so we remove that. Okay, that's good. So what is the point? Oh, because we did that, now children are not getting sick, elderly are not getting sick. Ah, okay, still, what is the impact of them not getting sick? Because they don't get sick for this something avoidable, the healthcare budget of the economy does not get badly impacted, and there's more resources for people who actually need them. Okay, so that's the impact. A lot of the times, especially education related founders don't understand like input, output, outcome, and impact. So in order to convince somebody else to give you resources, social founders need to do these connections really strongly with data, with narratives, with stories, with proven research. Technology founders don't need to do much of it. They just need to figure out how they will go to market, what will happen, because they're telling, here's a money making machine, complete black box. You put $5 in, $10 will go out in 2 years. Okay, how that machine works is completely dependent on the startup's model, go to market strategy, channels, and everything else. But it's simple. It's usually technology based, data driven based. If it's working, if there's a product that the market wants, there's product market fit, it's fairly easy to find investment. But with impact, okay, that's where it gets tricky.
Yeah. I mean, I always think of that saying, give a man a fish, he'll be fed for the day. Teach a man to fish, he'll be fed for life, right?
Yeah.
So that's always something to keep in mind to make sure, it's not just input output. It's you always have that element of impact that continues to live on and develop in different ways in the, in the culture, ecosystem, society, whatever it might be. Yeah. And I think it's so easy to just get into like the one problem that you're solving when you're talking about impact. But then it's like, how does that really benefit the society overall? You really need to think about all the different ways that it's like the domino effect and stuff.
Exactly. I think in the previous episode, we talked about communities, and that's where most of the impact usually comes, which is a secondary impact. If you're able to get the real impact done, there's always secondary positive loops that you're enabling as a social entrepreneur, which is the most critical reason why we need more social entrepreneurs.
Yep, definitely. So I think, now I'm curious when we're talking about how to communicate this narrative, how to make sure that it's seen and understood and heard, who is really listening to that? Which investors, which funds, which VCs are out there that are ready, to listen to impact stories, impact solutions? Who's out there, and how can you make sure that you're heard by them?
So this requires a lot of homework. And this is usually where I give founders the homework, which they, 50% of the time they don't do. And then I save a lot of time, that's research. First and foremost, finding the people is relatively easy because now we have every kind of social technology that enables people to just voice their concerns, shout out on what they're doing, and it's easily understandable, it's easily searchable. Now, even with tools like ChatGPT, you can even use AI to help you do majority of the work for you in terms of removing things, in terms of finding out the clues. Finding the real people is not the problem. Finding the institutions is not the problem. There are so many research, so many reports. Crunchbase is a good tool. Yes, not directly for social impact, but there are tools for that. PitchBook is a good tool. And there's so many reports for Middle East where I'm currently at. There's a tool, there's a reporting or like a data collection tool called Magnet in Turkey. The same is for Startups Watch. In different countries, every country has their own version of data collection and distribution. The difficulty piece is building relations. Most important, again, once founders understand that they need to be able to understand what the investors want. So that's the first thing they need to figure out. The second thing is they just need to take out this investment fantasy. I met a person in an elevator, I pitched, and I got the money. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen anywhere else but in Silicon Valley, which I've seen happen, so I wouldn't believe otherwise. But apart from very rare occasions, you need to build relations with investors. Investors usually are smart enough not to be driven by FOMO, fear of missing out. So they look for opportunities that are developing in time. Some of the founders get desperate and they say, okay, I have 3 months of money left. I need to find an investor. They go knocking on every door, emailing everything, Twitter harassing almost a lot of it. Doesn't usually end up well. You have to start building relationships with investors if you think you're going to be needing investments as early as a year before. Let's say you started something's cooking up, it's moving okay. You know you will probably need investments if everything goes in plan. You need to start building relationships a year before you actually start asking for money. And building relationships, yeah, it's easy and it's difficult. It just takes time. You need to find the people, start online conversations. I love Twitter for that. And I've made so many relevant friends, and I met so many interesting people in conferences that I've been to only through knowing who will be there and by making a connection prior, seeing what they're talking about online, and then approaching them to talk about similar things if I cared about them, not faking, oh, you talked about, I don't know, flowers a month ago. I also love flowers. By the way, I have a, no, I mean, if you care about one thing, you care about it. If you don't, you don't. Like, those are personal connections. You can't force personal connections. I'm not saying you be friends with them. That's a different thing. That's a different requirement. But you need to understand what they are looking for, what you are going to be offering, what is the reason why that you think it's a good fit. And that requires homework. That requires a lot of work before you actually start fundraising. So fundraising is not like, oh, these guys or girls are moving around with their checkbooks and then they meet you and they like you and they write you a check. It doesn't work that way. It's a relationship, because an investor relationship will take much longer time. Let's like turn that into a social analogy. You go to profiling sites when you actually want to do more work done. You don't go to your neighborhood store to do the easiest things for you. You actually need to try and understand what these people will look for, what would a relationship, a very long-term relationship would look like. Are the people enjoyable? Are the people kind of people you want to spend a lot of time with? And you can only do it by doing your homework, reaching out, being vulnerable in a sense, because you're not there yet, and making sure what you are doing is what you're telling people what they're doing, being honest, being vulnerable, being open. Impact investors are sometimes harder to find because there are not so many startup conferences or there are not so many startup accelerators focusing on impact investors. But if you go to any 5 event in your domain, in your domicile, in your country on social entrepreneurship, you're going to start seeing the same people, which means 50% of the people that you should be meeting, you could find them in 5 events. Then you need to do the hard work of searching for more, for people who don't like to disclose what they're doing so much. And you can only do that by references. So you talk to people, you ask them, is there anybody else that you think I should be talking to? And then you'll be surprised. Like, friends will introduce to friends, people like-minded will introduce you to people who are like-minded. And putting yourself out there very openly, very transparently, honestly, is a good key to build those resources and relationships.
So you work with startups on a regular daily basis, and obviously, funding is a huge element of probably what you talk
Sure.
to them about, either as a mentor, educator, trainer, whatever. Is this something that you support startups with, like finding the right
Yep.
investor, finding, whatever? How do you go about that with them? Do you encourage them to do the research, or do you do it in parallel with them? Should other people be looking for like a mentor?
So finding investors is not difficult. Finding founders is sometimes more difficult because good founders don't disclose sometimes what they're working on and if they're fundraising or not. Investors, they have no chance but to disclose everything. They need to say they're investing. They need to say what they're investing in. They need to be out in events. So they need to be visible. Otherwise, they don't get deals. So for founders, it's easy to find the investors. For investors, it's harder to find the right founders at early stages, especially. When a founder does its magic and a team does its magic and things are moving really fast, they will not need to contact 25, 30, 50 investors. They need to contact 10. They will know what they look for. They will be selective. And the job of the investors is to be on that selected shortlist. And that's very important. That requires information, that requires connections. So this is what we do most of the time. If we see a founder really strong and is moving really fast, everything's working perfectly, they will need investments. And if we know investors that will be looking for an opportunity like that at that stage, at that business model, at that industry, then we make connections. We first usually invest in the team with either time or money. So we get them ready for investments, which is a tool that we've been developing for a while. And because of that tool, the founders will also know where they are. Sometimes they get very myopic and they start saying, oh, I know everything I need to know, unless somebody like us comes and beats the crap out of them, saying, oh, you don't know this, you don't know this, you don't know this. But that's okay. As long as you know what you don't know, then you can figure it out. Of course, there's a lot of egos involved with founders. They will feel they've done the great work and now they need to reap the rewards and finding a really good investor, etc. But fundamentally, it's about relationship building, and it's about understanding what each other will play a role. We don't invest large ticket sizes, and because of that, we are not a threat to larger investment groups. But we don't also just go out and tell the founders that will help them fundraise and get their money or get commissions out of it. We don't work on commissions. We really work with the founders. That's why we're very selective. There are groups who would just start working with you, kind of help you out and introduce you to 20, 25 people and get 2 to 10%, sometimes even more percentage of the funds you raised. I don't do that. I'm not a big fan of that. And I usually tell early stage founders to not agree with those commission-based introductions, because it's very counterintuitive. And here's why. If I know you're developing something really interesting and amazing and something I would like to be part of, and I want to take you, I want to help you move. If we have that connection, if I have that interest aligned, that's all about alignment. I will be very happy to introduce you to people, to promote you, to support you, to defend you if investors are kind of pushing you hard on things. I will be able to help you move forward because I believe we're aligned in the mission, in what you're doing. That's why I'm more aligned with founders that are doing something on the impact side. And on the other hand, I'm also aligned with the investor because I know what they don't have a lot of time with, to spend a lot of time with you on a longer case. They don't know you as much as I do. So I have a relationship with the founder. And if I know they will be a good match, it's like pretty much matchmaking, to be honest. You know what your friends like, you know what other friends like, and you see like, okay, this guy, this girl, they can actually be together. I mean, he has his perks, he has his quirks. Let me bring them together. But before you bring, you kind of warm them up to each other. You tell them, oh, here's what will happen. These are the good things and these are the bad things. And you don't get money out of that building relationship. That's why I do the same. I help the founder, we align, and we also align with like financial incentives as well. And then if we do the work, then I can go and get them other interested parties that will equally align and equally benefit with the relationship.
It sounds like a fun job, not the easiest at times, but
Yes,
definitely
it's
interesting.
not easy.
So, let's say a team doesn't have you accessible or someone like you accessible. How can they make sure that they look good to an investor? Let's say they have their story straight, they know what their impact is, whatever. But how do they actually look good?
So they need to do the homework, and we keep telling this. Fundraising is a work. And one analogy I have is like the horse races. 10 horses get into that box side by side, and there are 10 jockeys that will run the same circuit. The founders will either be the horse or the jockey. If they don't do their homework and they don't align 10 different investors to compete to be able to invest in them, they become the horse that other jockeys will be riding around, investors will be riding around. And they're not doing it in bad faith. Like, if you're not prepared, you're not prepared. So, definitely number one, like, get get educated on what the investors look like, what they would want, what are the stages they're investing, align them, try to bring competition on the table. Again, in order to increase the value of your, not only to increase the value of your investment round, but also to find the best terms of investment. The valuation is one of them. There are many others that are important. So first, do your homework. It's a process. You can't treat it like a random event. You need to understand the process. You need to run the process. Otherwise, the process runs you. That's number one. Number two, have backups for your own work. As a founder, fundraising will consume 3 to 6 months of at least one founder's almost full-time job. So if you are running technology, if you're CTO and a founder and you want to fundraise, and if everybody else is, if your other co-founders are also technical, it's good because then you can deploy some of the work to them. But if you're doing marketing or sales and you're the founder who's going to be going after investments, somebody else has to do marketing and sales. And this is a big dilemma with founders. I cannot start fundraising because I don't have enough time. I can't have enough people to help me with my time because I didn't fundraise. So there's a lot of the chicken and the egg situations. And that's the tricky thing about being a founder. You need to juggle a lot of things at the same time. As a founder, this is going to take almost all your time. So you need to be ready for that time dedication. You can't just start and turn off and then restart and do this and then, oh, I don't have time. I need to go to a conference for 2 weeks in order to sell, but all the other things that are happening in terms of fundraising are not done. So all of a sudden you're late on fundraising, or you don't go to that conference, or you're late on revenue generation. So you get hooked up with alternative oppositional requirements of your work. So every founder needs to be very ready to leave part of their work, majority part of their work, to somebody else, have a view system, have a checking system with their own team, that so that things don't fall into cracks, and then focus primarily their goals on fundraising. So that's number two, like, do your own work, get prepared yourself, prepare your team as well. And the third thing that I think is even more important than the first three is, don't get discouraged. You're going to hear a lot of no's. No is a good thing. You're going to be hearing nothing. You're going to be hearing crickets most of the time. And that's the worst thing. If you're not hearing anything back, you can't close that line that you created. Best thing is to push investors to give you a direct no, or as soon as possible a no. Because if they keep on giving you crickets, which means no respondents, no answers, no comments, then you don't know. So you can't close that line. The more lines that are open, the more time you'll be spending. So getting no's is a good thing. Know that having a no is an okay thing. It's usually not today. It's usually, if you've done the homework, they're usually telling you, oh, you're too early, or there's something else missing. So maybe not now, but later. So that's a good relationship you built. With crickets, with no response, no comments, no requests, or if they don't return emails, that's where it gets really tiresome. But again, a no is a good thing. You'll receive a lot of them so that you get to a few yeses. You're not going to get hundreds of people trying to get into your deal. 5 is enough. Sometimes 1 is enough. But you need to be able to take no as a not yet, and not take the no as a curse or a judgment on how good you are as a person, how well developed you are as a team or how good your business. And no is a no. It means there is a misalignment. You failed to, and it's not a failure. That's the point. You didn't have the right connection. They don't have the right time or right money or right structure. So I said, no, it's okay. Just move on. Don't feel discouraged. Don't fall. I had a lot of founders who said, okay, I talked to 20. Everybody said it's interesting, but nobody's giving me money. Okay, talk to 20 more. That's okay. That's fine. You have to have a lot of self-conviction that you will be able to close the round. Because the worst thing is you can start a round, but if you don't close it, it always remains open and kind of becomes a huge distraction. So when you open a round, have a deadline of when you want to close it. Things change, but don't be on the fundraising mode for a year. If that's the case, go find a mentor and ask them like, what is wrong? Why am I not closing? And then maybe you're actually missing out on some things that maybe you're not fundable. Maybe there's something wrong with the business model. Maybe there's something wrong with how the team is operating. But again, don't take any of these personal. I think it's like good advice.
Definitely. And I think there's a lot to be said for having that appropriate support system around you as
True.
you're on this journey, whether it's via mentors or your team,
Other
which is
founders.
hopefully, just having those resources available for you to, benefit from, talk to, commiserate with.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to be said for that community aspect as well. And it's a
100%.
good thing that there's so many startup communities out there to
Yes.
support other founders. Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. And I think, I think it's a big question for impact startups. Looking at this, investing world, VCs, funds, whatever. I think there's a big question mark there if it's really, the obligation of those investors or VCs to be interested in these kind of solutions and to really, value this impact over profits from an easy tech startup.
Yeah.
You know, obviously you have a soft spot for impact startups, but that can't be said for everybody else. But do you have an opinion on, we're coming into this day and age where we really need to be focusing on these solutions and we
Yeah.
need to be talking about impact. So how can we make sure that VCs and investors really kind of pivot to think about this as the most important way to look forward? What do you think?
So let's try to be optimistic instead of being pessimistic, which I have a tendency to do. What we will keep on seeing, I think, is a good segue to what should be happening. What do I mean by that? A lot of the first time investors, a lot of the family funds, a lot of corporate venture capital, a lot of second or third generation leaders in companies that are large and that are investing in venture capital firms to invest in startups, family offices, are moving towards understanding their businesses will be better off if they do things differently. So this will have a trickle down effect on which funds they will put their money in. But most importantly, this is going to have an impact on how they do business. Most companies established in, let's say, after 1920 or established after 1950s never had any concern whatsoever for anything that's on their environment. I mean, it will be very presumptuous to say all these now 100-year companies did there for the good of their heart. No, they haven't. And they know that. That was the times they had to prioritize one thing, which was growth and profitability. Very few examples here today exists where the start of the company has something that's related to impact. Maybe Patagonia is the only company that I can think of that the purpose of the company itself was to build impact, increase impact, save what is priceless for that community of climbers and nature goers and hikers and everybody else. Apart from those, that maybe another handful, the concept, the initiation has nothing to do with impact. It was all to do with progress and growth and revenue and market share and a lot of the other things. Now, the second generation, the third generation of these companies, leaders of those companies or families that don't have the best heritage, to be honest, in terms of their impact on the world or impact on the social life. Uh, how they were treating their employees, how they were treating their partners, how they were treating their ecosystem. Like a lot of mining companies in the UK have a past of either using slave labor, same with a lot of American companies, but in the UK, a lot slave labor or child labor. They can't get away from that. Like that's how they did. That's how they operated. They couldn't care less. But now it's not only unthinkable and illegal on many things, but it's also immoral. So morality has started to kick in into how these companies are operating. Some of it on the surface as PR, whitewashing, greenwashing, and whatever's the latest terms are. Some of it on a deeper level of change adoption. The change adoption, I think, is going to play a lot more significant role in how companies are moving towards this. Movements and communities that are prioritizing companies that are doing good have been always around, like starting with a lot of the NGOs, like Greenpeace's of the world and everything else. There has always been social push. There has always been people that are being vocal, that were risking a lot of things to make good in the world through convincing companies, mostly shaming and naming them, and trying to push them to do different things. One thing they were able to do most of the time is to change how regulations are done, how regulations are passed, especially in Europe. A lot of regulations have been pushed forward not because everybody was happy with the regulation, but because the society started to increase its voice. Groups, social groups increase their voice. And also they start to use something else, which is their wallets. So a lot of these companies are now shifting towards, at least on the human side, or same also on the environmental side, are shifting towards environmentally conscious products, environmentally conscious testing, no animal testing in cosmetics, organic or near organic products, free or free-ish animals or meat production, or sensible. They're becoming sensible in the right term of the world because they're now a very large consumer group. And I think the investors will start paying more attention because individuals who would raise funds to be able to ride on this new wave of economic growth, economic and sensible and ethical and progressive growth, will start finding more companies that are doing the right thing. And I think that's partially because people are seeing how dangerous it is if these only profit-driven companies will be. It's they can't do what they used to do, which is a good thing most of the time. And it doesn't mean we don't want companies to grow. It's not like, oh, now we are communist or socialist or we want to remove ownership or wealth. No, not really. We just need that to be equally distributed with more perspective for social and environmental causes, with a more perspective on the future generations. So there is money to be made. There is impact to be made. It just needs to be done in a different way. So investors will be waking up to ask money from these individuals and these large companies. Companies are waking up to create investment structures that will endorse new technologies, helping them strategically align their goals with the environmental or the social side of things. There will be more changes. The problem is how fast. I hope it's not stalled. I hope it's faster, as a lot of things are moving into negative cycles really faster than we thought they would.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for making sure that that mindset shift that so many people have adapted is, makes its way into other sects of
True.
society and life.
True.
We can only hope.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that
So,
writes in my art. Yeah.
so for the startups that are listening and maybe they have an impact focus, if you had to leave them with, one or two words of advice, maybe they're starting to look at funding or starting on this journey, what would you leave them with?
Oh, good. Let's use the rule of three and find three smart things to say. First, know your shit. Like input, output, outcome, impact. Like know it by heart, measure it by heart. Don't fake it. Like, oh, if there's no way out of all this. Like, know your shit. Second, know that this will take time. Like finding the right people, finding the right investors, getting in front of the right people at the right time will take time. So you need to do a lot of work. The fact that you're going to be changing the world or you have a huge impact, it's okay. It's like singing in the shower. If you're a good singer, you can't just sing in the shower and assume people will love what you're doing, what you're singing. You need to be out there. You need to be doing over. You need to be doing a lot of work. And I think the third thing correlated to singing, be visible. Be visible, spend time with other founders, other community members, build your own support group. Don't think you're alone in this game. It's not 1980s. There are so many things done in so many different companies, so many different countries, so many different communities. Never leave yourself alone, your team alone in this endeavor, because you don't need to be alone, and you will probably not be able to do it if you're acting like you're the only person who has this right, brilliant mindset and a heart of gold to do the impact. No, there are millions of people in the world focusing on whatever you guys are impacted or impacting, and just be connected. Don't feel lonely, and it's a wellness issue as well. If you're not well, you cannot do good. So be well, be connected, do your homework, know your shit, I think. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing, so much incredible information, insights into
Hope
the
it
world
helps.
of, investing, crafting a narrative, making sure that, whatever founder is out there is prepared to address the very scary VC that's out there and
Yeah.
ready to fund them, probably. So I really appreciate your time. I think this is a great conversation. We're going to dive deeper into more about, scaling,
Yep.
growing impact, making sure that it continues and utilizes the right resources out there. So I'm looking forward to our future conversations. Thanks so much
Take
for
care.
your time.
Thanks for your questions.
See you in the next episode. We hope today's conversation with Ozan Sonmez has enlightened and inspired you to think about how technology can shape a better tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful discussions, and join us next time as we continue to explore the transformative power of tech. For more information about Ozan's work, go to www.mrozonsonmez.com. This is Empires of Innovation, signing off.